why God allows pain and suffering. And this is all, it has been a part of our Beyond Betrayal program. The whole Beyond Betrayal project that we have is for anyone who feels cheated by life, others, or God. And oftentimes that shows up in our relationships, but it's not excluded to that. But so why does God allow pain and suffering in our lives? Well, in this episode, we're going to consider how that God uses pain and suffering in our lives to bring us good. So let's go ahead and we'll dive into that in just a moment. Karen, welcome to the broadcast.
Hello.
I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Just another opportunity to I'm very interested in this topic. I really am. Not just this particular aspect of it, but
Right.
the whole topic in general. That's why I created the Beyond Betrayal program, was to explore that and help people to figure out ways to get beyond betrayal, and hence the name. So one of the things that we've been doing in this particular project is that we have been looking at video clips, just real short ones, from Charles Stanley. And he has some good insights on this. And so why don't we just go ahead and watch one of those now, and then we'll get back into our discussion in just a moment.
All right.
Let's do that.
Some of the most powerful lessons in my own life have been the result of coming to the end of myself and recognizing, God, if you don't help me, I don't have any solution. Drives us to God. And you say, well, that's not love. Oh, yes, it is. Anything that drives you and me to God is good for us. And what Paul said, in the midst of this suffering that God would not remove, he discovered something about himself. He discovered something about God. And he said now he could rejoice over the very thing that was causing him pain because of what he learned, because of the freedom and the liberty that he began to experience as a result of that.
So what do you think about what he's saying? Is he just full of baloney, or is there something to it?
I'll tell you one thing that I was thinking is that
Mm-hmm.
when it says anything that drives us to God is good. I do agree with that. But a lot of times with people, when they have pain and suffering, they don't get driven to God. They get driven to drinking. They get driven to drugs. They get driven to self harm.
Yeah.
All these other kind of things. So I don't know that pain and suffering, if the purpose of why God allows it is to drive us to him, I think it
Mm-hmm.
backfires an awful lot, that it might not be quite the best way to go about.
All right. Well, I'm going to push back on that just a little bit.
All right.
I've been working on a project called Mad at God.
Mhm.
And it's for those folks who are kind of like what you say, are in that space where it's backfired, at least from their perspective. They're mad at
Mhm.
God because why didn't you protect me from this? And so many people, when it comes to pain and suffering, they have this, and I'm just going to say it this way, is that they have this naive expectation that God can protect us from all pain and suffering.
Mhm.
And particularly if we are trying really hard to walk in his ways, we almost have a sense of entitlement that he is going to protect us from pain and suffering. So
Yeah.
now here's what I want to say about that. Let me just connect the dots where I'm heading with this.
Mhm.
Is that if we believe, and I realize that some people don't, and so they have kind of like an entirely different understanding of spiritual things, and I'm okay with that, but I want to at least hope that Christianity will get a fair hearing. That if we believe that what the Bible teaches is that we live in a fallen world. So in other words, the creation itself doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. My wife and I, we just celebrated our 50th anniversary, and I can tell that there are aspects, about both of us as we're aging, that things are not quite like what they used to be, and and my wife, even more so than me, is experiencing a lot of troubles with mobility right now, and so it's just so the creation we live in is fallen. Is that the people who surround us are fallen, and that I myself am a fallen creature.
Yeah.
Now, if we accept those three principles, that then what do you expect? Do you think that God is going to all of a sudden jump in and fix what is broken with His creation just because you're suffering? And I think that's a naive expectation. As a matter of fact, I don't even know how God, I don't think that it would even be feasible for God to do a lot of what we expect from Him. Because in many cases, that would mean violating. Let's say, for instance, that your partner cheated on you. And that, and as a result, you have a broken heart. And let's say even, let's just kind of extrapolate this out further. Let's say at one time your partner was a good and faithful Christian, but now you're struggling with trying to put together the pieces of your life as a result. So what do you expect God should have done in that situation? Should He have jumped in and stopped your spouse from doing what he did before he did it? Because now your heart is broken and you think, well, if God really loved me, He wouldn't let me go through this type of stuff.
Yeah.
But and so but if you think that that's what God should do, then I always like to turn the tables on that. How about when you break somebody's heart, or you don't live up to the righteous expectations that that they have towards you? Do you think that God should jump in and stop you dead in your tracks whenever you're going to hurt somebody? We, in all honesty, we don't want to live in a world like that, because none of us would survive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we don't want to surrender free will. And then also, I do think, um, I guess the technical way, like if we're just picking apart what he said, it seemed like he was saying that God uses pain and suffering to draw us close to Him. And I think that God maybe not so much uses, I guess, allows pain and
Sure.
suffering,
Okay.
and
Yeah. Okay.
that He, um, yeah, of course, He wants us to be drawn to Him, but I don't know. I guess kind of I was not really feeling the way he was saying it. Kind of sounds a little bit like, anything that's bad, that draws us closer to God is good. But I think sometimes, and maybe I'm just getting his words mixed up, is that um, those kind of situations just end up putting people into a space that doesn't get them closer to God.
Yeah, I know, and I understand. I understand the point of view. Like I say, I think it's a naive point of view. Now, I'm
Hmm.
not saying, and sometimes we just have to we have to kind of like go through that experience in
Yeah.
order to come to the realization that my belief system is based on some faulty concepts, and I need to correct that. Now
Yeah.
I'm going to push back just a little bit again, because I've really been thinking about this over the last few months, if not a little
Yeah.
bit longer. I've really been focusing on
Right.
this, and actually a couple other big topics that has captured my thinking. But one of it is that if we make the presupposition, if we make the assumption, and
Hmm.
here again, that I'm approaching this from a Christian perspective, but if we make the assumption, and I think that, in all honesty, I think there's extremely good evidence that Christianity is true. I don't think we have to just quote unquote take it by faith, and that's a
Right.
topic for another day. But if we take it, if we make the assumption that God is all wise,
Hmm.
He never makes a mistake on what He allows in our life.
Yeah.
That He is all loving,
Hmm.
and what He permits in our life is because of His love for us, not because of His disappointment in us, or whatever else. And that if He's all powerful,
Yeah.
then He's able, for lack of a better he's able to pull the rabbit out of the hat. So in
Hmm.
other words, that what looks like has really been detrimental towards me
Hmm.
is, I hate to say this, but I actually do this with my clients, at the right time, is that is that it's really a gift,
Hmm.
because it's always a gift to grow. It's always a gift to align ourselves more deeply with the truth, and it's
Yeah.
always a gift to have our childish understandings of God shaken
Hmm.
into maturity.
Yeah.
You know, so but
Yeah.
I understand what you were saying about, yeah, and I get it. I get it. I've been there myself.
Yeah.
But I don't like pain, and I don't like suffering, and you're crazy if you do, you know. But but I've also come to see its role as a gift,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So
Like Joseph, in the Bible,
mm-hmm,
he gets to the end after, being sold into slavery and being in prison and all these
yeah,
things. Gets to the end and he's overseeing the nation and his family's
mm-hmm,
reunited and all these things. And I mean, it doesn't seem like he goes, "Man, I really wish didn't have to go through all those things." He says, "What you intended for evil, God worked out for good."
yeah,
And
he
even
always does when we let him.
at the beginning, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
Joseph saw what was good about the things that he was enduring.
Yeah, yeah,
But once he was able to see what God had been up to, um, and taking that awful situation, he saw that God's God had a plan all along to rescue him from and make
yeah.
something really really awesome from all of that.
I guess it really boils down to this: is that am I going to trust God's good purposes in my
Hmm.
life,
Yeah.
even when I don't like them?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a passage of scripture, and you know it too. You know it as good as I do. Is that maybe even better, but where James says, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds,
Hmm.
for the testing of your faith produces patience." And I can't remember the rest of it, but and let that
Mm-hmm.
have its and essentially it says let that run its course so that you may be mature, complete, and lacking in nothing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I listened to Jordan Peterson talk the other day. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of him in everything he says, but he talked, and maybe I mentioned this in our previous broadcast, but he talked about how that God is doing something bigger in our lives than just trying to keep us happy. You
Right.
know, It's-
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
um,
Well, there's
so
also that verse, the one that kind of helped me kind of as I was going along through some struggles that really helped me is
mm-hmm,
that um all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And
yeah,
so it's like, when you're in the midst of a struggle and you can't see it yet, what
yeah,
God is going to do that's for good out of
mm-hmm,
that situation, if you trust that he is going to do something good out of it and know, like, okay, I can hang my hat on this is a promise. God's working out something for good. If
mm-hmm,
you can trust in that situation and stay faithful to him. So instead of, like, getting sidetracked or getting upset or bitter or whatever, if you can stay the course on that,
mm-hmm,
um, then it will turn out for good, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Even if, and I've thought about this many times too, even if you don't quote unquote live to see it,
Hmm.
because for the believer, when whatever you're struggling with brings you to the end of your life, still, he's working that out. That's kind of like the ultimate blessing
Yeah.
that he accomplishes in your life. So that
Hmm.
passage you quoted is in Romans 8:28. The
Hmm.
problem is that most people quit before the blessing.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know that, and so they check out. They check out on God. They lose hope, and they never do. They never they never get to the benefit.
Hmm.
They only get to the badness.
Yeah. Well,
So,
there's a contingency in that verse. It doesn't say
mm,
all things work out for the good of everybody,
yeah, mm-hmm,
you know,
yeah,
no matter how they live their lives. It says for
mm-hmm,
the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So, I mean,
yeah.
if you're loving God and you're called according to his purpose, you're going to do things his way.
One of the things that, and I see this so many times, is that it's easy for us to love God when things are working out according to our desires. I mean, who
Hmm.
doesn't want that? That, but then, and I've dealt with people who have been extremely hurt in life, and that's why I'm doing this project. But
Hmm.
and I have been extremely hurt, and I know that you have. Um, but but the I lost my thread. What were we talking about?
We're doing this project. Uh,
Yeah, we were talking about that.
mm,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I remember. Is that when really bad stuff happens to us, then we oftentimes feel entitled to go into dark places.
mm,
And I'm talking about either bitterness or uh, you know um, anger or resentment or revenge. All of those. And I see this so much, particularly when there's a betrayal that's involved in it. But
mm,
but the wrong that they've done to you is not a free pass for you to do wrong in any aspect of your life. Not just
mhm.
wrong back to them,
Yeah.
but just becoming embittered and resent. I don't, and I know, it's a horrible thing that happened to you. I get it. I get it.
Mhm.
I just have to tell a quick story, and maybe one of these days I'll spend a little bit more time with it. I remember counseling a woman years ago whose daughter and daughter-in-law were murdered by a drug addict who thought that they had dope in the house. And her 5-year-old granddaughter was in there when those two women were murdered. When the police, when they came to investigate, they just kind of like, there was a crime scene, and so they essentially isolated anybody from coming in, and that little girl was still in there.
Oh,
And man, I never, I get a little bit emotional. I want to see if I can get past that, and
yeah,
because I remember talking to this mom, and I remember just the guttural sobs that she was crying and
yeah,
during this time. And she said, "I'll never forget when I finally was able to see my granddaughter, how I peeled the socks off of her little feet and took them over to the sink and washed them out because they were so bloody. She was running around in her socks, And she says, and it just dawned on me, it just hit me that I am washing away the blood of my daughter. Now, of course, I've talked about other circumstances, and I can tell some of those stories maybe later on. But even when life gives you such a hideous thing as that,
yeah,
that doesn't all of a sudden give you a free pass to go into those dark spaces that we talked about.
yeah.
So, anything
So,
else before we wrap up? I have one other thing I want to say.
well, what would you say? Like, how do you avoid it though? Like something like that. How do you not
Okay.
end up in a dark space?
Okay. The way you end up, the way you avoid it is exactly what Jesus says. And he says this, that and this is what we do in our Beyond Betrayal program. There's other things that we do, but we essentially put shoe leather to figuring out how to do these things in our life. And one of them is, Jesus says in Matthew 5:4, he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Now, if you're not getting to comfort, then you haven't been mourning, even if you're sad. Grief is the sadness that cures sadness, and we spend time walking people through the grief process, what they've lost as a result of this harm that they've experienced.
Yeah.
The other thing that Jesus says, I can't remember now. I can't remember the order. I think it might be in the in just a few. I'm looking it up here on my phone, but in just a couple passages later, see if I can get to where I would need to be. In Matthew 5, that's where we find that blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted passage. But in Matthew 5 and verse number 7, it says, God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Now, people get confused about that because they think that, well, if I show mercy to somebody, that means I'm excusing what they did. And absolutely never. I think that the guy that murdered those two people needs to go to jail or prison forever, if not lose his life, and that's a debate for another day. But I do believe that unless and until we forgive the others for the harm, so we show them mercy, and we don't even have to have contact with them in order for us to do that, but we have to go down that path, and I know the resistance to that. Well, you don't know how bad they hurt me, and I said, yeah, I don't, and I never will.
Yeah.
But if you stay stuck in bitterness,
Mm-hmm.
revenge, wrath, anger, depression, discouragement, who loses?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, So that's another thing. So when you ask the question, how do you get past that? It's the same way that anybody gets past that, is that you have to walk down the path of grief and forgiveness. There's other things that kind of factor into that, but we don't have time for all of that right now. But that's where I always take people.
Yeah.
I always walk them along the journey of grieving their losses and forgiving their offenders appropriately. Not
Yeah.
not this, not this stupid little, forgive and forget nonsense that people like to preach.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
okay. But I had some other stuff I wanted to talk about, but I want to just wrap up with this because we're
Okay.
almost out of time. But I was talking with a lady the other day who has experienced another profound betrayal in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, and she and I great, and I'm glad that she reached out to me, and we've been working on this project together to get her beyond betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
But I told her, and I oftentimes get to this place, and I think I mentioned that earlier. I get to this place in working with my clients that I say, you don't see this right now, but you've been given a great gift. And I think that if she could have reached through the video chat and slapped me in the face, she probably would have.
Yeah.
But I said this to her: we would never be having this conversation if you weren't in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in this space, sure, because they hurt you. But you need to take a kind of like a closer look at your people picker. Something's going on there. And also that you need to look at the unfinished work in your character.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, we like to, you see, blame is a trap, and we can talk about that another day. But blame is a trap because we say, well, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and unless you're a completely innocent child, you are, and those things happen to children all the time. But
Yeah.
and we have no way of controlling that, but we are in control of whether or not we're going to heal from that. But unless you're a completely naive and innocent child, as an adult, is that we move into relationships, and a lot of times we are overlooking warning lights.
Mm-hmm.
We're not setting appropriate boundaries when somebody mistreats us. And I said, you wouldn't be interested in this type of conversation if you went happily skipping down the lane and life is good, I found my soulmate, now everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So all right, well, we're out of time because I don't like to kind of like run these things too long, and it's easy for me to run my mouth too long.
And you have like about 3,000 things that you said, we'll have to talk about that. That's a topic for another day. So
I know, I know, I know, and so
you
it's
have a lot of topics for other days.
well, and I guess that probably is good,
Yeah.
because
Right.
it's uh, it's good to have topics for another day.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this stuff. I've been in full time ministry since 1976. So you either learn some stuff along the way, or you need to just get out of business.
Right.
All right. So that's it. I'm going to wrap this up for now. I'm actually making some
Stop
little.
fiddling.
Huh? Say
Stop
what?
fiddling.
I know I have to because I had a thing that was broken on this and I needed to reset it. So, okay, now let me just go ahead and jump off. Maybe you can stay on and then we'll have a chance to talk afterwards. So, hey guys, thank you for joining us today for this particular episode of Beyond Betrayal, and particularly why God allows pain and suffering in our lives. And when he does, he's always good, he's always loving, and he's always wise. He always knows how to get us to the space where we need to get, and that's in deeper spiritual maturity and personal growth, and becoming the man or the woman that you are meant to be. We don't like going down those paths sometimes, but I like what C.S. Lewis says, is that God never inflicts a needless tear. And so that's the truth. And so you can learn a little bit more about the stuff that we talk about in Beyond Betrayal by joining our Facebook. It's a private Facebook group. We have designed it that way intentionally, and you can go to on Facebook at beyondbetrayal.org, or you can even just maybe go on the website Beyond Betrayal and you can find a little bit more about that. But I would really encourage you to go to our Facebook group, because that's what we deliver so much more content there than we do elsewhere. So that's it for now. Thanks again, and I appreciate you and your desire, your interest in healing your broken heart. That's it for now.